Hello guys, welcome all of you with our new video series. In this series, we are going to discuss 50 database management system questions covering all basics to advanced. So let's get started. Here we have our first question. The data of all the students and teachers of Pinwala Mahavidyalaya are stored in books. As a result, some of the data has been destroyed. Therefore, the principal of the school has decided to enter the data of all the students and teachers in the school into a computer software. The software was commissioned by AI Soft. Assume you work as a software engineer for that company and the part you are assigned to create the database. To do this, create a database using the information below. Here we have been given a structure of our two tables. The table name is student and the other one's name is teachers. In the student table, here we have our column names as index number, first name, last name, gender, contact number and address. And here we have our data types for this relevant column name and the length of that data type. After that, here we have our teacher table description. Here we have our first question as create a database called SchoolDB to store teacher and student data. And the second one is create a table called student to store student data. Follow the instruction below to create this table. Here we have our instructions for creating student table. And the third one is create a table called teacher to store teacher's data. Follow the instruction below to create this table. Here we have our instructions for creating our teacher table. So let's talk about our first question. It is create a database called SchoolDB to store teachers and student data. We can create this database using two methods. First one is using a query and the second one is manual method. When we create a database using a query, we can create our query as create database if not exist school DB. So we use create keyword to tell the database management system to create a new database. And here we have given what we are going to create, and then here we have said if not exist. What this means is if this and here we have our database name. So what this if not exist mean is if the database which name is SchoolDB is already available in our database, then this query won't be affected, or this query won't be creating a new database as SchoolDB because it's already exists. This query only creates a new database if that database is not already present in our database management system. So our next one is using a manual method. So let's go and see how we can do this in practically. In this time we are using HeidiSQL to create our database. HeidiSQL is a third part database management software, so it's help us to visualize our database. So here we have typed our query as create database if not exist SchoolDB. So let's run this code. When we run that code, in here you can see affected rows 1, found rows 0, warning, duration and the other stuff. So we didn't get any errors, so that means this code should have run perfectly. So let's refresh. Okay, so let's find out whether this database has been successfully created or not. Here you can see we have our created database as the SchoolDB. So let's go into our second question. Here we have our second question as create a table called student to store students data. Follow the instruction below to create this table. And here we have our instruction to create this table. So how we are going to create it? We can create a table using also a query and a manual method. So when we create a database using a query, first we need to define what database we are using, and to do that we use keyword. Here we have type use school DB. So it's going to use our created database school DB, and then in here we have run a query to create our table, and we have said create a new table as student, and only create that table if that table is not already presented within this database. After this code, here we have given our column names and data types. Our first column is index name and the data type is varchar, and in here we have given the length of our column. After that, our second column name and the data type, third column name and the data type, fourth column name and the data type, fifth column name and data type, sixth column name and data type. So let's go and see how we can practically create this. Okay, so now we have typed our query in here. So let's run it. We didn't get any errors, so let's check in our SchoolDB database to see whether this table has successfully created or not. So I am going to open our database. First we need to refresh it, and then in here you can see we have our newly created table as student. So when we double click on this, here we have our column names and the data types, length of that column, and the few other information. So let's go back into our question. Here we have our third question as create a table called teacher to store teacher's data. Follow the instruction below to create this table. And here we have been given instructions to create our teacher's table. We can do this also using two methods as a query and using a manual method. When we create this using a query, first we need to define what database we are using, and then we are going to say create a table if that table is not existing in our database, and then the name of our table, then the column names and data types. So let's go and see how we can do this in practical. Here we have our third query. So when we run this, it's not going to give us any errors. So let's refresh our database. And when we look into our database, here you can see we have our newly created database table as teacher. So when we double click on this teacher, we can see the details of this table. Here we have our column names and the data types and the length of this column. So let's go back into our questions. That's all in our first question. So thanks all of you for joining with us. See you in our second question set.